This is a pair of articles from the Reformed Presbyterian Magazine published in October of 1838 entitled Idolatry in India and Famine in India. First, idolatry in India. Fellow countrymen, believing that the generality of you are unacquainted with the proceedings of the Indian government, both at home and abroad, I beg to address you on the subject, trusting that when they are made known, you will with one voice denounce them as unchristian and iniquitous, and through the medium of petitions to Parliament, oblige them to repeal measures which are a disgrace to any government or nation calling itself Christian. The British possessions in India consist of an immense territory and a population of 100 million of souls, more than a tenth of the population of the whole world, immersed in idolatry, the most sanguinary and brutal, and superstition, the most obscene and abominable. You would naturally suppose that a Christian government would use every means to instruct and enlighten such a people, instead of which the rulers of India have been determined opposers of all attempts to instruct in the truths of Christianity the inhabitants of that benighted land, and only submitted to measures for that purpose when they could no longer resist them, and they have lately declared at a general court that they will receive no further remonstrances on the subject of the pilgrim tax. The support they publicly render to idolatry, with the violence they do to the consciences of their civil and military servants, by obliging them to attend in honor of the idolatrous festivals and ceremonies of the heathen. The support rendered to idolatry by the British government is briefly this. Number 1. They pay a band of organized pilgrim hunters to collect pilgrims from all parts of India who persuade multitudes by the assurance of eternal happiness to undertake long and painful pilgrimages, from which not 1 in 5 returns alive, who otherwise would never think of leaving their homes. These pilgrim hunters are paid so much per head for each person they persuade to go. Consequently, the more they get, the better they are paid. The surplus of the tax goes into the treasury of the Indian government, which in 15 years, from 4 temples alone, amounted to upwards of 1 million sterling. Number 2. They pay the priests and prostitutes who frequent the temples, £5,000 a year being paid to the native officers of Juggernaut's temple alone, out of the proceeds of the pilgrim tax. The car of this idol, under whose ponderous wheels hundreds are yearly crushed to death, is ornamented with English cloth of diverse colors, at the annual expense of £200, furnished by the British government. And number 3, they do violence to the consciences of their servants by obliging them to attend in honor of the idolatrous ceremonies of the heathen. They treat with neglect the respectful remonstrances which they make against it, and the Commander-in-Chief of Madras, Sir P. Maitland, sooner than enforce these unchristian orders, has resigned in disgust. Fellow countrymen, will you not unanimously protest against this crying iniquity? Some of you are doubtless anxious that the poor heathen should be brought to a knowledge of a crucified Savior. But while the devoted missionary is toiling on the plains of India to effect this blessed object, the Indian government are doing all they can to frustrate it, by sending forth a larger body of emissaries to delude and ruin souls than all the missionaries in the world who go forth to save them. But a newspaper is not the place to enlarge on this painful subject. Petition Parliament from every town and village. It is believed that 120,000 human beings are annually sacrificed by the Juggernaut pilgrimage, and knowing this, if we remain silent, we are very guilty. An officer of the Indian Army who has been obliged to attend in honor of an idolatrous festival, the London Recorder. And the second article, Famine in India. The upper provinces of the Bengal Presidency were, when the last dispatches reached England, the scenes of the most frightful misery and mortality. Owing to the extreme poverty of the natives, occasioned by the impolitic and ruinous system pursued by the government of India toward the occupiers and cultivators of the soil, tens of thousands have been reduced to utter starvation. On the 14th of April last, 78,000 pining wretches, men, women, and children, were fed by bounty at Agra between the 1st and 15th of March. 71,523 infirm and sightless creatures were relieved in a similar manner. So great have been the ravages of death that the air for miles is tainted with the effluvia from the putrefying carcasses of men and cattle, and the rivers of the Juma and Ganges choked up and poisoned by the dead bodies thrown into their channels. The water and fish of these rivers are rejected as unfit for use, and men are kept constantly employed in pushing the accumulated bodies down the torrents. From the July number of the Oriental Herald, we learned that starvation, disease, and death are doing their work at Kauporn, Muta, Gwalior, and Delhi, while the wealthier natives look on with listlessness and unconcern. Though a famine fund has been established by the European public of India, it is found impossible to meet the necessities of the destitute and dying multitudes. A correspondent in Calcutta thus writes on the 10th of April, quote, "Since the dispatch of the overland mail for Berenice, which left Bombay at the close of last month, public attention in this quarter has been engrossed by the accounts which daily reach the capital of the horrid ravages of famine in the provinces to the west and northwest. It is impossible to compute the numbers who die in their tedious progress from the desolate districts to the towns where food is procurable. We hear almost daily of mothers deserting their children on the highways, of children crawling around the granaries to pick up the grains of rice accidentally scattered during the process of distribution at the doors, of the roads being lined with dead bodies, a prey to the vulture and jackal, of the courses of small rivers actually obstructed by the masses of bodies thrown therein by those who are employed to clear the highways, of the inhabitants of the large towns of Agra, Kauporn, etc., being compelled to abandon their evening drive from the impossibility of encountering the effluvia from the putrid corpses all around. And the worst of it is that 2 months more must elapse before a fall of rain can be expected, and the earth yield fruit wherewith to appease the irresistible cravings of hunger."